In this video, we're going to be solving a trigonometric equation. So we're going to find all of the solutions of sine of x plus pi over 4 plus the sine of x minus pi over 4 equal to negative 1 in the interval from 0 to 2 pi. So here we can see that we're going to need the sum formula for sine as well as the difference formula for sine. Let's recall what those are. As we look at the sum equation, we can see that our u is represented by x and that our v is going to be represented by pi over 4. If we look at our difference equation, we can see that our u is going to be represented by x and that our v is going to be represented by pi over 4. So now we can go ahead and we can plug those in. So for our sum formula, we now have the sine of x times the cosine of pi over 4 plus the cosine of x times the sine of pi over 4. And for the difference formula, we have the sine of x times the cosine of pi over 4 minus the cosine of x times the sine of pi over 4. Now looking back at our original problem, we see that we want to take the sum formula for sine and we want to add that to the difference formula for sine and then set that equal to negative 1. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do now. So now we have the sine of x times the cosine of pi over 4 plus the cosine of x times the sine of pi over 4 plus the sine of x times the cosine of pi over 4 minus the cosine of x times the sine of pi over 4 equals negative 1. And so now we can simplify. And we see that we have a positive cosine x times sine of pi over 4 and a negative cosine x sine of pi over 4. So those are going to cancel out. And that's going to leave us with 2 sine of x times the cosine of pi over 4 equals negative 1. So we want to try and evaluate the cosine of pi over 4. And if we recall our unit circle, we can go ahead and see that the cosine of pi over 4 is radical 2 over 2. So we can go ahead and we can plug that in. And so now we have 2 times the sine of x times radical 2 over 2 equals negative 1. And we're still trying to solve here, so we're going to go ahead next and we're going to divide both sides by that radical 2 over 2. And that's going to leave us with 2 times the sine of x equals a negative radical 2 over 2. Nope, we've got to keep change flip. That should actually be a negative 2 over radical 2. So now we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by 2. And that's going to leave us with the sine of x equals, and we're going to have another keep change flip right here. So we're actually going to end up with a negative 2 over radical 2 times 1/2. And here we're going to see that those 2's are going to cancel out. And that's going to leave us with a negative 1 over radical 2. And so now we just need to rationalize our denominator. So we're going to go ahead and multiply both the numerator and the denominator by radical 2. And that's going to give us that the sine of x equals a negative radical 2 over 2. So to solve this, we need to know where does the sine of x equal a negative radical 2 over 2. Now if we look at our unit circle, we see there are lots of negative radical 2 over 2's, but we need them to be in the y's position. And so we see that that happens in two places. It's going to happen right here at 5 pi over 4, and it's also going to happen over here at 7 pi over 4. So we can see that our answers are going to be x equals 5 pi over 4, and x is going to equal 7 pi over 4. And those are all of the solutions on the interval 0 to 2 pi.